5 rapes, 7 attempted abductions, 3 girls sexually assaulted. 1 man did them all. 1 call to Crimewatch nailed him.
Excuse me, can you give me directions to Flanshaw Hotel? If you're getting in, show me.
You're all right as long as you complied with what you wanted to do, as long as he could dominate you.
It's okay.
Just get in the car, will you?
But as soon as you resisted, then he would use violence against you.
He asked me to pull my trousers down and lift my top up and everything, and then he started touching me. He said, if you don't listen to me, then I will hurt you and I'll kill you.
Still now, it's still upsetting to know it's your daughter. You know, somebody's got her and done what he's done to her.
She was 4'6" at the time. I've never really hated anybody, but I do hate this man.
It began on New Year's Eve 2004 when I received a call that a young 12-year-old girl had been abducted from the Batley Road area of Wakefield. It became apparent that we had certainly 3 linked offences. From the descriptions that the young girls were able to give us, and we were able to piece together a profile of what we thought our suspect looked like.
From the girls' descriptions, the police made an e-fit of a white male between 25 and 35. He was said to have a fat head, 1 gold and 1 missing tooth. He often posed as a policeman and drove a silver car. That still left nearly 250,000 potential suspects. With so little to go on, West Yorkshire Police called on Crimewatch in April last year.
Is he right speaking?
Yeah, he's not in the office.
When our appeal went out on Crimewatch, we had 175 calls, which was a fantastic response.
Yeah, Harrison.
Can she describe the vehicle that was involved?
Amongst those 175 names were probably 20-25 people who were actually serving police officers, prison officers, security guards. The key element to a lot of the offences was Batley Road, which runs from Wakefield Prison out of Wakefield. And out of the dozen or so prison officers on my list, I'd interviewed 5 until I came up to John Hall's name. I told him what it was about and said, look, it's routine, but we're basically having to speak to people who've come into our inquiry. He said, well, I've got an interview this afternoon. It's a governor's interview, so I'm available this morning.
John David Hall lived just 3 miles from Wakefield Prison. Every day he used the Batley Road to get to work. He agreed to be interviewed at his house.
He invited me in and led the way into a dining room. So I sat myself down at the table and got my papers out, and straight away he sat himself at the head of the table and looked very imposing. He said, how have I come into this inquiry? And I explained that, well, the fact that you're a prison officer and you live in the location, the offences, who had access to a uniform.
Hall didn't just have access to a uniform. He had a love affair with it. It was the outward sign of his authority, his power. His father had been a respected prison governor, and Hall followed him into the prison service when he was 20. He was ambitious and rose to become principal officer of Wakefield Prison. He was responsible for designing prison security systems for a jail housing child killers Robert Black, Roy Whiting and Ian Huntley.
He had this huge head, fat head. Asked him about his teeth. He says he's got a gold tooth, showed me it. And if he'd got a tooth missing, and he pulled the top plate down, one of his front upper teeth was missing. So I'm thinking, yeah, this is going well. I then asked him about 3 particular dates.
The first was New Year's Eve 2004. A 12-year-old girl was walking along Batley Road when a car pulled up alongside her. The driver posed as a police officer. He told the girl that if she didn't get into the car, he'd make her. She was driven to an unused road called Stony Lane under junction 41 of the M1. He ordered her to undress, then sexually assaulted her.
He asked me if he could go and get his diary, and he disappeared for a few minutes and came back with the diary and said, yeah, it was definitely working an early shift. And I remember now, he says, I felt unwell and I made my excuses and I went. I said, what time do you get home? He said, about midday. The next date was the 12th of November, 2004.
A 14-year-old girl was waiting at a bus stop on Batley Road when a car pulled up alongside her. The driver asked her for directions. Then he told her to get in the car and show him the way. She refused.
He looked through his diary and said, I was in Egypt, we were on holiday. Can you tell me when you went to your holiday? And he said, we went on the 3rd and came back on the 12th. I said, well, the 12th's the key date, so what time did you come back? And he said, the early hours. So I said, the rest of the day you didn't go back to work? And no, I didn't go back to work that day. The 3rd date is the 10th of August 2003, which is a long time ago.
On that day, a 13-year-old girl was abducted in Batley Road. She was driven out of Wakefield and sexually assaulted before being let out of the car. Hall couldn't remember what he was doing on that day.
And then I turned to Mr. Hall and said, we're also asking if you'll supply the DNA. He thought about it and said, I think I'd best just have it on this inquiry. I don't like the idea of it going on a national database. And I asked him why, and he said, well, I'm going for a governor's interview. I'm conscious that it might affect my job. Fair enough, reasonable answer. But in the back of my mind was I've not had a refusal from any of the other previous prison officers. And then, just as I'm about to go, he says, well, am I in or am I out? And I gathered my papers together and I said, at the moment you're in.
One of the main things when Martin came to me, he did say that Hall was a high-ranking prison officer, which shouldn't make any difference, but it's the same as a high-ranking police officer. They're difficult to investigate. They're very well protected by their own organisations, and if we go in with a non-sensitive or a non-diplomatic approach, then we can ruin somebody's career.
Hall's fellow prison officers said he was one of the most popular and likeable characters you could ever wish to meet. His leaving party before coming to Wakefield was the biggest officers remembered.
I really interrogated Martin and said, look, you prove it to me why you think that Hall was the person involved in this offence.
Firstly, he's a prison officer.
Yeah.
He's got a fat face, clean shaven, glasses, has a gold tooth and a missing tooth. And he has a silver Peugeot, and there's no alibi for the relevant dates.
The board was very one-sided, but it could still draw a blank with a jury. The evidence was purely circumstantial.
There was no evidence at that stage. There was nothing, no evidence at all. The last offence committed on the New Year's Eve of 2004 was against a 12-year-old girl. There was no physical evidence, there was no fingerprints, there was no DNA.
She was in shock, she was shaking and crying. It just seemed so unreal. You know, you hear of these things happening, but I'm still paranoid to this day. Keeping her safe, and how would I keep her safe? That was a real worry. I even put pots and pans at my back doors in case anybody tried to come, because she couldn't remember whether she'd given him his address or he'd tried to make her give his address. And so I was terrified.
Police now had evidence of at least 10 offences against children, but it was all circumstantial. They had to dig deeper.
His only previous mention on police records was back in November 1997, when he was eliminated from an allegation of rape made by a 17-year-old female.
The teenager was living in a children's home. In November 97, Hall pulled up in his van and asked if she'd go for a drink with him. She'd seen him around Leeds and agreed. He gave a false name and took her to the house he shared with his first wife. He asked her to wait for him while he changed. Instead, he attacked her.
He said, get upstairs. I said, no, please, don't. I was crying and pleading with him. But he just said, shut up, you know the consequences. He then raped me.
The following day, Hall was arrested on suspicion of a stranger rape. He told the police it was consensual. This time he got away with it. But it didn't wash with his wife.
We spoke about the arrest in November '97, and she said then that it was a family friend that represented him, and he was able to tell her the content of the statement this woman gave to the police. And it was clear that this woman had been to the house, she'd been upstairs in the bedroom, she described the Winnie the Pooh hot water bottle on the bed, and she'd made her mind up then. She rang her mother and said, I've had enough of him, that's it, I'm out of here.
Police then discovered another allegation of rape against Hall from the same year. He had tricked his way into a 19-year-old's flat, saying he wanted to use the toilet.
I was stood in the living room. He's come back through, I was stood near the fire, and he's walked towards the door. I thought he was leaving, but he didn't. He locked the door and put the key. So I asked him what he was doing, and I asked him if I could have my key back, please. Next thing, I was on the floor with my underwear down. When he was laid on top of me, it felt like I was sinking in, because he was that big and heavy on me. I just couldn't move.
We decided to arrest him for the 10 abductions of children. The main issue here being that on the 1st of July last year, the rules regarding obtaining DNA changed from being one of on charge, after charge, to being on arrest. And in the early hours of the morning, I met him outside his front door. He was on his way to work. Told him he was arrested for 10 offences of child abduction and indecent assault, and he turned to jelly, absolute jelly, and started rocking back on his feet. And when he was being booked in, he'd got his cocky head back on and said, I'm not going in any cell. And the duty sergeant rolled his sleeves up and said, right, Dave, let's... And he said, okay, I'll go. He's good at putting on this front, but inside he's weak as jelly.
Hall was asked to give his account of the child abductions and rapes back in '97.
Forgive me flipping a little bit, but I'm getting... I've told you all I know. I've told you, I've tried to help you, and you're asking me again the passage of time about these incidents, and I've told you all I know. And what I told you about that incident was that I had sex with a girl in Belle Isle, not forced, completely consensual.
Although he was a prisoner, it was what he was used to. He was used to working in confined environments, working with people who were under arrest. And it wasn't long before he was trying to boss and tell the police officers who were dealing with him what to do.
You don't lift me in my uniform and then bang me in front of a load of people down there. What do you think I'm going to do? Run off?
Hall's arrogance came from years of getting his way. He's said to have watched the Crimewatch appeal and told fellow officers they'll never catch him. He's too smart for them. When police seized Hall's car, they found a boot full of hardcore pornography. Sexual images of children as young as 4 were found on his home computer. Hall had tried to delete these after seeing the Crimewatch appeal. Hall denied everything, and the young girls he'd abducted from Batley Road failed to pick him out on a video identity screen.
Fucked completely with it. Can't carry on with it anymore, any of this bollocks. I've told you everything.
But the DNA sample taken on Hall's arrest was entered onto the national database, and this gave police their first real breakthrough. It matched a rapist from 7 years earlier. The victim, a Leeds prostitute.
I asked him for money before we had sex, and he just gave me one almighty crack in the jaw. My jaw came out of its socket, my head was all over the place, and I passed out. He was a massive bloke and his hands were like shovels. My jaw was broken in 2 places and they had to rewire it. It was horrible. When I came round, he was on top of me, raping me. He was smiling.
But Hall's arrogance had got the better of him.
He ejaculated in a condom and I saw him throw it away. Later I showed the police where it was and they took it.
I have had no involvement at all in this crime. None at all.
Hall was rearrested on suspicion of rape, but again he was released. His father put up the £100,000 bail.
And with all due respect, I've just no further comment.
John David Hall portrays himself as being a respectable family man, a man with a career, a man with a future that everybody likes. We found the other side of John David Hall. We found this sexual predator, this paedophile, a guy who will stop at nothing to satisfy his own sexual appetites. He didn't bother to worry about the young women that he raped. He didn't bother to worry about the young girls' lives he's ruined.
It's every mother's worst nightmare. I can't help thinking of how she must have felt in that car. And that death, that just doesn't go away.
Hall's family moved to Wakefield in the early 70s when he was 2. So he played in the country lanes that ran by the M1. Stony Lane was one of them. Hall had courted his first wife here. And it was here, 15 years later, that he assaulted a 12-year-old girl. But Stony Lane was to leave its mark on Hall's car. Remember, police had started with 250,000 silver cars, but Hall's Peugeot 307 was unique. Soil samples from around the wheels were compared with those from the scene. They matched. And when his prison locker was searched, police found a fleece similar to the one described by the young girl attacked at Stony Lane. Fibres from it matched those found on the girl's underwear. Now, more victims came forward with horror stories about Hall. A 25-year-old told police that she and 2 friends slept at Hall's flat in Wakefield after a night out 5 years ago.
I remember I woke up to the sight of him close to me masturbating. I told him that he'd got the wrong idea, and as I tried to get off the floor, he grabbed hold of my ponytail and tried to force me to have oral sex. I was resisting, and he couldn't get an erection, and that made him more aggressive. He started hitting me really hard with his fist.
These 2 men, you know, the front that he gives his friends, his family. I mean, his wife, you couldn't meet a more intelligent, nice lady who must be scratching her head now and thinking, how the hell have I been duped by this man?
I've nothing more to add at this stage at all, other than what I've told you. I've told you the truth, and obviously you'll have to go away and check what I've told you.
Behind this facade lies this pervert who's into anything to do with women from all ages, and is what you would call a predatory paedophile, as well as a rapist.
We never did out any of us girls, we never expected it. And we thought it was someone we could trust with him being a prison officer.
In November last year, Hall was arrested for a 5th time. This time, he was refused bail and charged with 5 rapes and 1 attempted rape. He stood trial in March, still trying to get his own way.
Right through every interview I've ever had in this police station or any other, I completely and utterly refute what you're saying to me. Completely and utterly.
He pleaded not guilty. All the women had to go into the witness box to relive what he'd done to them.
I turned round to the officers and said I can't do it. But then I finally got courage up to sit down and look at him and put the blame back onto him. The
jury found him guilty. At his second trial for the kidnaps and assaults on the young girls, Hall pleaded guilty. The judge told him, "You're a grave and continuing danger to women and girls and will be for an indefinite time. Although not a matter for me, you might never see the light of day again." Hall got 12 life sentences.
Now, a story that made news around the world, a gruesome crime, little heard of since Victorian times, body snatching.
I said, "Have you got a problem?" And they said, "Yes, we're coming to kill you."
I don't give in to blackmailers. I said they're not going to blackmail me.
We're not monsters, we're just ordinary people doing a job that admittedly some people don't like, but it's legal, and until it's not legal, we'll carry on with it.
Just to dig up a human being, I mean, well, you can't talk about it because it's horrific.
You wouldn't treat an animal like that.
This is Newchurch in Staffordshire, known as Happy Valley. It's a gently winding vale along the county's eastern border. It's also home to Darley Oaks Farm.
We've always been a mixed farm, cows, beef, poultry, and if you're good at looking after animals and you've got the animals' welfare and interests at heart, then that's the most important thing.
For 30 years, the Halls had bred guinea pigs for medical research.
The animals will perform well if you look after them properly. We were producing the best guinea pigs in the country when we were actually forced out of business.
Local councillor Peter Clamp remembers the day life changed for the villagers of Newchurch.
It's a Sunday afternoon, and I remember this car pulling up with 4 people in it. They came across, and I said, "Have you got a problem?" And they said, "Yes, we're coming to kill you." One of them was dressed in a black cape and the scary mask, one of these scream masks. He said, "We're going to condemn you all because you love the guinea pig farm up the road." And at that time, I was aware that there was a farm, but I wasn't aware that there were guinea pigs. The following week, they came back with more.
A group calling itself Save the Newchurch Guinea Pigs broke into Darley Oaks Farm. They filmed their midnight raid on camcorder.
We were probably picked out because we would be weaker than the bigger companies, and they would think that we were an easy target.
They stole 600 guinea pigs. A week after the raid, a large group of protesters gathered outside the farm.
People die every day as the result of drugs tested on animals.
Animals get sold into the vivisection industry where they're going to be mutilated and basically butchered to death for nothing more than profit.
I'm certain that all the people here today do not want to cause any violence to life.
Sometimes they came every day of the week, and sometimes it might have been 2 or 3 times on the same day. I mean, we had them camping out overnight as well at the bottom of the drive.
If you can get everyone to keep moving that way. Kerry, calm yourself down. Kerry, calm yourself down and put your hands behind your back. You'll only make it worse. Put your arms behind your back. Put your arms behind your back, Kerry, now. Piece of calm down. You pathetic. You're all pathetic. God. Some people have.
Initially, the targeting was towards the Hall family and their business, and as you referred to it, they almost became target hardened. And so then you began to see a change of focus of who was victimised. It became people who supplied, business associates, and it was this almost this rolling progression that anybody was a potential victim, which is what made it so vicious.
One who felt the full force of their campaign was Rod Harvey. The protesters were determined to cut off essential supplies to Darley Oaks Farm.
We've come to speak to you about New Church Farm. We're giving you the chance to pull out before we start a big campaign of persistent regular demonstrations against you.
Shouting through the letterbox, calling us all sorts of animal killers, animal murderers. I only deliver fuel. I never harm an animal. It's frightening when there's so many of them, you don't know what they're capable of. We had to stop all friends and family visiting because we never knew when they were going to turn up. We never knew what they were going to come up with next.
Rod's wife Dot was also a target.
We used to have packages through the door with powdered substances in, abusive mail, invitations to our own funerals. The worst one was the paedophile one with regard to Rod.
We had a letter delivered next door saying that you're a paedophile. What are you on about? You're a convicted paedophile who preys on children that your wife procures while she runs and looks after the county youth darts. The police then, and I've got to give them every credit, issued a firm denial straight away.
Absolute disgrace! You are filth and will be back again and again and again.
There has been attempts to try to almost wrap what's been taking place in this cloak of morality, to give it some sort of noble cause. But when you actually look at what was taking place, any sense of morality had been lost.
You felt so sorry for these people being dragged in just because these people were so channeled into closing me down.
I personally won't rest until I know that all those sheds are knocked down and they're not going to be used again.
There was a profound effect on the village where I lived and surrounding areas. People started to get worried, the media started to arrive, and there was lots and lots of violence.
They targeted the gas, so we couldn't get gas for the turkeys. They targeted the tanker driver, so we couldn't get our milk collected, so we had to sell the dairy herd. It really just snowballed on, so really all we were left with at the end was the one thing that they had actually tried to close down, which was the guinea pigs.
That night that the brick came through the front door and hit me on the foot, the glass cut my hand, I thought, that's it. I've had enough, because me this time could be Doc the next time.
After 4 years of intimidation, Rod stopped delivering to Darley Oaks Farm. He was one of many businesses forced to sever all links with the Halls. The village was under attack. No one felt safe. The militants even buried their anger deep in the golf course where the Halls played. Then in October 2004, the prolonged and vicious campaign took an unexpected turn.
The police came up to me in the afternoon and said, we've got some bad news for you. I said, oh, I'm used to that. He said, no, this is really bad news. And I said, oh, is everybody all right? I thought it was somebody had been injured or something. He said, no, everybody's all right, but I've got to tell you that your mother-in-law's grave's been dug down to.
The scene that I was greeted with was unbelievable. The grave where Mrs. Hammond had been buried had been completely dug out. The coffin itself had been damaged and smashed.
And Gladys's body had gone.
Just to dig up a human being, I mean, well, you can't talk about it because it's horrific. The thought that these evil people might go and do something as terrible as that, I mean, it's just beyond comprehension, really.
To desecrate lovely Gladys's grave, an absolute outrage. They call us scum, but I wonder if they really know the meaning of the word.
Everybody stood around the churchyard, and there must have been 200-300 people, all stood there in silence. You could only hear the birds singing. And I thought to myself, this is absolutely the lowest form of human indecent acts.
As a senior investigating officer, you're used to calls of serious crime taking place, but this is one that actually took you back because it was something you don't hear of and something that, you know, abhorrent. The control over the protests at Darley Oaks was under the guise of a movement referred to as the Save the New Church guinea pigs. It became quite obvious that if any, you know, something of this nature taking place, they had to have some involvement in it. A couple of months after the Gladys's body was taken, we got some letters, the authors of which had an intimate knowledge of the crime.
These letters demanded the closure of the guinea pig business in return for Gladys Hammond's body.
It became obvious that it was furtherance of their blackmail to the Halls, but to desecrate a grave, I mean, how can that be classed as protest? That's not a protest.
There were 4 main suspects known to be the ringleaders of the campaign: Kerry Whitburn, his girlfriend Josephine Mayo, John Smith and John Ablewhite. The day after Gladys's body was stolen, only the hardcore protesters turned up at Darley Oaks farm. Police filmed Whitburn and Mayo being asked to leave.
Do you mind not protesting for that? Before the grave desecration, there were protests every Sunday, and those attracted between 30 and 50 people. After the desecration, that changed very dramatically. Numbers dropped significantly, down to, on some occasions, less than 6. But those people that did continue to come were, in the main, those that were involved in criminality.
They were so fixated on their cause as they continued to commit crime, they continued to send explosive devices, and they also continued to send letters around Gladys's body, the conditions, you know, that had to be met before she would be returned.
You don't give in easily to these sort of people, but at the end of the day, you do have to look at not what they were doing to me, but what they were doing to other people, and that's the thing that really I had no control over.
The theft of Gladys Hammond's body proved to be the final straw.
Farm breeding guinea pigs for medical research is forced to close by animal rights extremists. The family that run the farm in Staffordshire say they've had enough after 6 years of intimidation, including the theft of a grandmother's remains.
Everyone's absolutely ecstatic that this place will be closing at the end of the year and that no more guinea pigs will be suffering inside the sheds.
The militants got what they wanted, but the Halls still didn't get Gladys back.
Now, a story that made news around the world, a gruesome crime.
In March, 6 months after Gladys's body had been stolen, the police made an appeal on Crimewatch.
You've got new information tonight. Tell us about it.
Yes, we've received some letters recently which, in style and content, are similar to previous letters we received from animal rights extremists. However, what's extremely interesting about these letters is that the author seems to have an intimate knowledge of the crime, also claims to know the whereabouts of Gladys. There was a number of objectives that we wanted to achieve through the Crimewatch appeal. First one was to make a public acknowledgement that we'd had the letters, and also of interest our main suspects, what their reaction would be.
Straight after the programme, Ablewhite, Smith and Whitburn drove to Brackenhurst Woods, a short distance from Newchurch, where Gladys Hammond had been buried.
Their car was searched. What they had on them was a collapsible spade, balaclava, a change of clothing, and a number of mobile phones that were linked to subsequent criminality.
The 3 men were arrested. After being interviewed, they were released on bail. The police then got another set of letters.
What it was endeavouring to do to verify that they actually had Gladys's body, that they placed 1/6 of her in a plastic container somewhere within Brackenhurst Woods, and that they would provide GPS coordinates.
These map references never came. Nearly 100 officers searched the 90-acre wood. The body wasn't found. Last September, Whitburn, Mayo, Ablewhite and Smith were arrested and charged with conspiracy to blackmail.
I felt that they were just out-and-out criminals that weren't really animal rights people. They just wanted to make people's lives hell, and they did that through the animal rights movement because they thought that if it got to court, protecting animals is going to look a lot better than just being an out-and-out hooligan.
In May, Josephine Mayo was jailed for 4 years. John Ablewhite, John Smith and Kerry Whitburn each got 12 years.
I believe that they knew that they were going to get caught. The desecration was their bargaining stick, and I believe that to this day that they tried to bargain with the police for a more lenient sentence.
John Smith was the one who finally revealed where Gladys Hammond's body had been hidden. The family held a second funeral.
At the time I was saying they're worse than animals. I mean, you wouldn't treat an animal like that.
Well, dear Andy Price, what an ordeal this mother and her 14-year-old daughter have gone through. They've given up everything they know, they've left everything behind.
Hello, Mrs. Johnson. We're Worcester CID.
They talked about injecting my daughter with heroin. They told me that we'd be killed.
A 14-year-old schoolgirl was befriended by a man in his 40s, and that came about by asking some of her friends if they knew anybody who would have sex with him.
I just really wanted to get them done for this, and I think that's what made me get really angry.
This is the worst case of attempting to pervert the course of justice I've ever dealt with. The level of violence used was unbelievable.
My life is pretty normal. Had a lot of friends. I like living in Worcester because I was never alone. I always had someone there.
I am a single parent to 3 children. I never felt that I wanted to move away. I'd settled there and I was happy and the children were happy, and that was all that mattered.
My friend said, "Would you like to earn some money?" And I was like, yeah. And then she explained that it was to sleep with a 40-year-old man. I said no. But then one day I got a text off a number I didn't recognise, and it said, "Hello, Ducky." So I texted back saying, "Who's this?" And he said, "Andy." He kept texting me. It was over quite a few weeks. Then he introduced the money.
Andy offered to take her to the seaside at Blackpool and promised to give her £100 if she agreed to have sex with him.
We arranged to meet, and he rang up the school pretending to be my dad, saying that he wanted to let me out of school and that. He took me to my house. He seemed like a really nice person. And I went upstairs and I got changed out of my school uniform, and then he came upstairs and I had the door closed and he pushed the door open. So then I just ran into the bathroom and got changed there. Just kept getting texts just most days, and he kept making rude suggestions. And I got really, really uncomfortable, and I just didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to keep it all a secret.
For 5 weeks, Andy pursued her relentlessly. Finally, Jane made the brave move to tell her mother.
She told me his name was Andrew Hall and that they had been communicating, and she didn't know how to get out of this situation.
She asked me what was wrong, so I told her everything. And she was really understanding. And she told the police.
Detective Sergeant Andy Price began the investigation into Hall's background.
Andrew Hall, a man in his 40s, he lived around in this area. This is Norton, a fairly new private estate on the edge of Worcester, a very nice estate. He had an IT business, fairly young family, married. On the face of it, maybe respected in the neighbourhood. A man I would describe as a bully. He was intimidating, he was arrogant, and I got the impression that he channeled that towards vulnerable people, towards women, towards children. I guess a dangerous individual.
In December 2004, Andrew Hall was arrested and charged with the sexual grooming of a female under the age of 16.
He didn't deny certain things had happened. He denied his intentions. I think that was his personality. He clearly blamed her. He denied his intentions to have sex with her, and said that she was just an infatuated schoolgirl who'd made it all up, really.
Hall's trial was set for the following September, and Jane agreed to give her evidence against him. Hall was released on bail. 2 months later, a smear campaign was launched against Jane at her school.
It said some really nasty stuff about being with a 40-year-old, which of course wasn't true, but I got really upset about it, and I didn't want to go to school. I didn't really want to go out because I was too humiliated.
The people responsible had no connection with the school. They'd been recognised, but witnesses were too scared to come forward.
We have never been able to prove or disprove anybody's involvement in that. Obviously, we would say that it was the start of this witness intimidation.
Another nasty surprise.
I went out and noticed something wasn't quite right.
We knew it was something to do with the case. We all felt under threat then. It wasn't just me, it was all of my family.
Mother and daughter were now under siege, but they couldn't see the enemy.
When we first found out that we was going to trial, me and my mum were quite alright about it. I thought it'd just be over and done with, it wouldn't be a big thing. That when all the stuff started happening, it just seemed impossible for us to go because we didn't want any more trouble to happen to us.
We now had the date for the court case and things seemed to calm down a bit, so my children went on holiday, and on the Thursday I stayed at work quite late to catch up. I eventually got home almost 9 o'clock, and the minute I got in the door, I hadn't gone a couple of paces, and there was a knock at the door. There was a man and a woman at the door, introduced themselves as CID. Within seconds of letting them in, I was attacked. I was jumped upon.
Keep still and be quiet.
Somebody on my back. I had a hand put over my mouth and I bit it. Blood was left behind. I could see a blue light, which I've since found out was a type of stun gun. They told me that the reason they'd come was because my daughter had accused Andrew Hall of this crime, that she'd made a mistake, she was wrong, and that it had to be put right. They talked about injecting my daughter with heroin, and they told me that should we go to court, we'd be killed. They said that I wasn't to ring anybody, and that if I didn't comply, then there would be worse to follow. And then they left.
10 minutes after they left, she just sat there in a state of shock. She's been assaulted. the phone rings, the mobile phone rings, and a third person reiterates those threats. In fact, that person says, they're the nice guys, make sure you're not there. That was Andrew Hall.
I went out halfway up my path and my car was 10 feet away, but I couldn't get in my car. I was too frightened. But I knew I had to get out of my house, and after about an hour and a half I went out to my back garden and lifted a large fence panel, crawled underneath it and ran to my neighbour's house. The next day, her husband took me back into my house where I gathered as many things as I could fit into my car, and I left. And I've never been back.
It took 4 days for Jane's mother to build up the courage to call the police.
He said, did I think I'd recognise these people?
She could do better than that. After the car incident, she'd rigged up her own CCTV.
And I said, I've brought the video with me.
And here were the attackers for 5 million viewers to see.
And I said, I've also got the clothing that I was wearing that has got the blood on it.
Jane's mother had bitten her attacker, and blood sprayed onto her blouse. A DNA profile was made, but no match was found on the national database. Terrified her attackers were still out there, Jane's mother asked for police protection.
Her life and her children's lives were in danger. And clearly the level of violence has been used on these people. Like any victim, we offer them reassurance.
I obviously wanted my safety guaranteed, and I didn't think that the police would be able to do that. But the witness protection officer that was brought along said that he could.
Witness protection is a joint enterprise. The victims and families have got to sign up to him themselves. It's we don't just tell them they're going to witness protection. It's their decision to be relocated and to be given different identities and be taken away from your friends, never to speak to them again. In itself is traumatic.
When I first moved, I was hugely scared because I thought, well, I don't know, I just thought someone was always behind me. I always had to look back over my shoulder. Every time I checked my phone or, I went on the internet, I'd always think of the nasty things that happened to me.
You can't show your kids you're scared, or else they'll get scared. But I sleep with the radio on at night. But then my oldest daughter sleeps with the TV on all night. And my middle daughter sleeps with the light on all night. And we didn't do that before.
Andrew Hall's trial was just days away. Jane was determined to give her evidence.
He had been pleading not guilty all this time. I was scared about seeing him because I just didn't want to see his face again.
I couldn't keep anybody else safe from this man unless we did something about it.
"9 months after Andrew Hall's arrest, he got his day in court.
I'm told that Andrew Hall went to court thinking that all was going to be okay and that we had complied. But very soon he realised that we were actually there. He really had nowhere to go.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
He was jailed on the grooming charge for 15 months. But detectives now had to prove he'd been behind the violence and the intimidation.
We have a situation here where we've got CCTV evidence, we've got both offenders clearly on CCTV, we've got a full DNA profile of the woman, and it's becoming very frustrating. We've got a family in witness protection, so we've got to quickly identify and arrest these people, hence Crimewatch.
We've got fantastic CCTV of this pair. We've got a really, really good look at them, haven't we?
Absolutely, and I'm convinced that somebody will recognise those people. I just need one of the viewers to tell me who it is.
It took just 2 hours. A viewer recognised the man seen entering the house. His name was Joseph Samuel.
Joseph Samuel, a lad in his 20s, been convicted on a number of previous occasions for violence and dishonesty. What was his motivation? We believe money. We believe Andrew Hall paid him to do it.
Police then examined Samuel's telephone calls on the days of the intimidation attacks. It led them back to Andrew Hall and to the unidentified woman on the CCTV. She turned out to be Andrew Hall's sister, Alison. She was arrested and her DNA was taken. It matched the blood samples from Jane's mother's blouse.
Why she did it, I don't know. Was she in fear of her brother? Misguided loyalty? Unless she tells us, we will never know.
All three pleaded guilty to conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. For their horrifying attacks on the family, Alison Hall was given 4 years and Joseph Samuel 5. Andrew Hall was jailed for 7.5 years.
I think he's just a disgrace. He should feel so ashamed of himself. He's got a family to think of as well, so he should know how, like, little children feel. In a weird way, I feel a bit sorry for him because he's got nothing better to do than just text teenagers.
I think the conviction of Andrew Hall, Alison Hall and Joseph Samuel will go a long way to giving them some reassurance to know that they are in custody. But whatever sentence these people have been given, our victim and family have got a life sentence.
If people are in that situation where they're not sure whether to go forward within the witness protection scheme, I would say without doubt go with it. You will then have some closure and you won't spend your life looking over your shoulder waiting for them or their friends to come looking for you.
There are a lot of good things, actually. I've benefited quite a lot out of it. Met new people. I found my boyfriend. I may have a dancing career because of living here. I'm a lot more closer to my family. We've just formed a better bond now that we're all together and we know, like, we're just there for each other.
Crimewatch is back, live, with more cases that need your help on Tuesday the 12th of September.